That Friday morning, Emily called me in a panic, asking me to come home immediately. I dropped everything at work, the family business my father left to my brother and me, and rushed back, feeling something was seriously wrong. Emily never interrupted me at work unless it was urgent, so I feared something had happened to one of our daughters. My mind raced with thoughts of them getting hurt during a game. They were both athletic, just like their mother used to be. Our electrical company had become the largest in the state. I managed the commercial side, while my brother Michael handled residential. We had been doubling our revenue year after year, making Mom proud. Last year, we cleared $5 million, a first in the company's 50-year history. After Dad passed, Michael and I turned the business into a $20 million operation. Mom, who owned the majority with 52%, made Michael president, while my brother and I each owned 24%. She also trusted me to handle her personal investments, which I aggressively grew with the help of her broker. But when I got home that morning, it wasn't an accident. Movers were packing up our house, and there was Emily, standing by the car I had just bought her. Calmly, she told me she was leaving me. Our daughters had already moved out without me knowing. She handed me divorce papers, telling me she'd fallen out of love and was with someone else. After 17 years, she was gone. No discussion, no closure, no chance to explain to the kids. My gut told me she had met someone online, but the truth was much worse. I asked the movers for the new address, and when they gave it to me, my stomach dropped. I followed the movers, and what I saw crushed me. Emily had left me for someone close, too close. The betrayal was unbearable, not just because she cheated, but because of who she ran to. Emily's brother and I were tight as kids. He was a Marine now, someone I still respected. But it wasn't him. This was worse. Growing up, I spent a lot of time helping out at Dad's business. After 10th grade, I started an apprenticeship and earned my electrical license. Michael learned everything on the job, but he also picked up some bad habits. While I worked on expanding the business, bidding on small contracts, and completing jobs under budget, Michael handled the grunt work. Dad always said I was the brains, and Michael was the brawn. Both of us were essential for success. At 20, I had my own place when Michael called me drunk, needing a ride. Emily, who was 17 then and stunning, was also stranded. I gave her a ride home, and her strict father was relieved to see me instead of her date. A week later, she asked me to take her to prom. I did, and that night, we started our relationship. Now, that relationship was over. 20 minutes after leaving home, I arrived at the office, seething. I headed straight for Michael's office, only to find his door locked. His receptionist, Sarah, said he was on an important call and needed privacy. "Sarah," I said, my anger barely contained, "I need you to come with me. You've got to witness this." She saw how serious I was and nodded. I kicked the door open and barged in. Michael ended his call quickly, looking up at me in shock. "You need to get the business appraised and buy me out before the divorce is final. Got it?" I snapped. Sarah stood there, wide-eyed. She had never seen me lose my temper. "What's going on?" Michael asked, confused. "The movers gave me Emily's new address. I saw my daughters there," I said, glaring at him. "She's staying with me until she finds a place," Michael replied coldly. "You're lying," I shot back. "She told me she's moving in with the man she loves. She handed me divorce papers." Michael went pale, unable to respond. Sarah's eyes widened as she realized what had been going on. "How long?" I demanded. "How long have you been sneaking around behind my back? I should get tested for STDs with how you've been sleeping around." Michael looked like he was going to be sick. "This isn't the time or place," he muttered. "There will never be a right time for this," I snapped. "Go to the bank or put the business up for sale. We're done, both as partners and as brothers." Michael tried to plead with me, his voice soft. "Daniel, there's got to be another way. We need you. Let's talk when you've calmed down." I wasn't hearing it. I picked up his desk phone and called Mom, putting it on speaker. "Mom, I'm done," I said, my voice steady but cold. "Today's my last day. Michael's going to buy out my shares." "What? You love the business. What happened?" she asked, panicked. "Ask Michael," I replied. "He wasn't in his office today because his secret lover is moving in. They'll be getting married after her divorce. Maybe you should pay him a visit." I hung up, leaving Michael speechless. He had been bragging about his new relationship for months at family dinners. Sarah, follow me to my office. I want you to witness that I only take my personal items and turn in all company property. Michael's face darkened further, but I didn't care. Before walking out, I couldn't help myself. Should I back out the door so you don't stab me again? What you and Emily did was worse than putting a bullet in me. I led Sarah to my office, where my receptionist Laura was working. Laura, I said, come in and join us. Sarah's going to need another set of eyes on this. Daniel, what's going on? Laura asked, concerned. I've quit. Michael stole my wife and kids, I replied. Emily served me divorce papers this morning, and the movers told me her new address, Michael's house. Laura and Sarah, our longtime executive assistants, were shocked. These two women had always supported us. Sarah suggested we document everything I took from the office and have it witnessed, showing her trust in Michael's leadership. It made me wonder how much my brother had hidden from everyone else. An hour later, with the list complete, I called security to escort me out, just to make everything official. Michael had left without a word, avoiding the fallout. As I walked out with my single box, Laura and Sarah teary-eyed by my side, I kissed them on the cheek and thanked them for their loyalty. I threw the box in my trunk and drove straight to a real estate office. I listed our home for sale, giving the agent Emily's number for her to sign off on the price. When I got home, all Emily had taken were personal items and the girls' bedroom furniture. I turned off my phone, sat down, and read through the divorce papers. Emily was claiming emotional and mental cruelty, asking for primary custody of Alex and Taylor, with me getting supervised visitation once a month. She thought I was too strict because I wouldn't allow our daughters, 13 and 15, to date without supervision. I had argued that I didn't want them to ruin their futures by making bad decisions in high school, but Emily saw it differently, thinking I was too controlling. She was going for the jugular, determined to make me out as the villain because of our differing parenting styles. I poured myself a stiff drink, tried to find something on TV, but ended up passing out drunk. I woke up the next morning with a headache, showered, and got ready for the day. After doing my usual Saturday morning chores, I turned my phone back on around 1 p.m. I had messages from my mom, brother, wife, and daughters. I assumed my daughters were siding with their mother and didn't bother with those messages. The only one I trusted was from my mom. I listened to everything, then deleted the messages. Emily's message said we could reach an agreement once I calmed down. Shortly after, the real estate agent called. Your wife finally showed up, but she wasn't happy about you including the furniture in the sale, Ms. Thompson said. After seeing comparable homes, she agreed to add $20,000 for it. Thanks for the update, I said. I want the house sold quickly. Too many memories. She was upset, not expecting you to act so fast, Ms. Thompson added. She even seemed surprised about you demanding to be bought out of the family business. She shouldn't be. I just want to be done with all of them, I replied. Emily's trying to cut me out of my kids' lives. She looked genuinely shocked, the agent said. But I get the sense she thought this would be easier for her. I'll handle everything from here. I hung up and saw my sister Gina pulling into the driveway. I finished making my coffee and went to let her in. Must be important for you to drive halfway across the state, I joked. Mom's devastated, Gina said as she stepped inside. She found out Emily and the girls are living with Michael. She couldn't believe it. How long has this been going on? I asked, my frustration growing. Emily admitted it's been about 2 years, Gina revealed. 2 years? How could I have been so blind? I muttered, handing her the divorce papers. Read these while I get you some coffee. Gina scanned the papers and shook her head. Emily's trying to cut you out of their lives completely. This is ridiculous. She's always been good at playing the victim, I said bitterly. And now she's trying to use the kids against me. Mom doesn't want you to leave the business, Gina warned. So, she expects me to stay and be Michael's cuckold, just to make her happy? I snapped, surprising Gina with my bluntness. Oh my God, Gina gasped, clearly taken aback. How do I even explain this to Mom? She understands the cheating, but she'll never get why you're walking away from the business. I can't work with Michael, knowing he's turned my own family against me just to keep Mom's approval, I said firmly. Your husband knows business deals. Maybe he can help me find a buyer for my shares. You need to cut Michael out of your life completely, Gina said, her tone serious. He knew exactly what he was doing, and it was deliberate. Gina called her husband to fill him in on everything. When she hung up, she looked at me, her face full of empathy. She said, he'll have a team appraise the company on Monday. I need to convince Mom it's the best option. I handed Gina the financial records from the last 5 years. Your husband will need these to get an accurate picture of the company's value. What about Alex and Taylor? Gina asked, her concern evident. That's up to Judge McDonald. I wanted Samuel Taylortain for this, but he's tied up with a big case. Emily's lawyer is making everything sound worse than it is, I explained. Gina and I had a brief chat before she left to meet with Mom. That night, sleep eluded me. The empty space beside me, where Emily used to be, made everything feel even more final. I decided that after meeting with my lawyer, I would get out of town for a few days to clear my head. The emotional weight was too much to bear in the familiar surroundings of home. Gina called me after she and Mom spoke with the pastor. The pastor had shared some harsh truths. The one who has been hurt the most may never fully recover. What they did was reprehensible, but it's not uncommon today. Love and decency are often just tools for manipulation now. Mom was shocked to hear this, and Gina relayed that Mom had agreed to sell the company. It wasn't just about Michael's betrayal. Mom knew that without me, Michael would likely run the business into the ground. She wants to know who should take your place, Gina said, adding a new layer to the conversation. Does she understand that I consider Michael dead to me? I asked, hoping Mom grasped the gravity of the situation. Yes, and I explained why, Gina replied. I had to explain what cuck means to her. Mom was so upset that she swore she'd liquidate Emily if she ever crossed her path again. Tell Mom to appoint Eric Stevens as president. He's well acquainted with every detail of the business and can ensure Michael doesn't undermine him. This is crucial for getting the best price for the company. If Mom can't do that, she should appoint you as CEO until the sale is finalized. I need to distance myself to avoid complications in the divorce proceedings. Gina agreed and later texted me, I'm the new CEO. I'll implement your suggestions tomorrow. While I was having brunch the next day, Emily called. I decided to answer this time. Can we talk? She asked, her voice tentative. No. If you or Michael contact me again, I'll file maltreatment charges. Everything will be settled in court, I said firmly. We need to discuss Alex and Taylor, Emily said. There's no reason for you to leave the family business. We can sort this out in court. I'm requesting paternity tests to confirm if they are mine or Michael's. I need to know the truth. I won't return to anything related to this situation, I replied, standing firm in my decision. Emily gasped. They're yours, and you know it. I thought I had a loving wife until Friday. I was mistaken. Given everything that's happened, I must question if I'm really their father. Michael could have deceived me all along, I said, ending the call abruptly. I then reached out to Laura's husband, Brian, who had been through a tough divorce himself. He arrived, read the divorce petition, and I laid out the situation for him. Let's be clear, Brian said. You don't know exactly when the affair started, only what you've heard? Yes, that's correct, I admitted. In court, you'd be justified in requesting paternity tests due to the family situation. The way you discovered the affair suggests long-term deception. Judge McDonald will need biological proof before making any decisions, Brian explained. Is the judge really that strict? I asked, feeling the pressure. Yes, he is. My own divorce took 6 months, but his rulings were fair and focused on the children's best interests, Brian said, sharing his own experience. I offered Brian a drink, and we chatted about his relationship with Laura when a truck pulled into my driveway. I looked outside and saw it was Michael. That dares to show up here after everything he's done, I exclaimed. I wish I had one of Dad's .22s, Brian muttered. But sit down. I'll handle this. If Michael won't leave, I'll use my badge. He doesn't want to deal with Cape Girardeau police. Brian opened the front door and lowered the screen so I could hear their conversation. Michael slammed his truck door and yelled, "Where's my stupid brother?" I told him we could work this out, but he refused to listen. Now he has to. because I need to straighten him out. If he won't listen, I'll shove my fist down his throat. No, Brian said firmly. Go home and cool down before you do something you'll regret. Screw you. Get out of my way. I left Emily in tears because he's questioning the paternity of our daughters. He needs to be straightened out, and I'm the one to do it. When did the affair start? Brian asked calmly. 5 years ago. If it's any of your business, Michael replied defensively. Interesting, because Emily told your mother it's been 2 years, Brian said, showing his badge. Seems like both of you are trying to make the other look like a liar. Michael went pale as Brian continued. After making Daniel an unknowing cuck, did you really expect him to just accept it and move on? Was it your plan to break him and make him your submissive? What gives you the right to think he should just do as you say? Michael stood speechless. Brian added, I wonder what the judge will think of this recorded conversation. I suggest you get back in your truck and prepare Emily for the paternity tests. Your story is unraveling, and any further explanations will just add to the lies. I watched Michael walk back to his truck, clearly frustrated as things weren't going as he'd hoped. Brian waited until Michael drove away before coming back inside. What's your lawyer's name? Brian asked. I'll contact her on Monday and send her a copy of this recording. I provided him with the details. Why did you bring your police cam? I inquired, curious about the necessity of his equipment. It's standard procedure in domestic situations, Brian explained. When Laura told me about the situation, I knew it could escalate. I came prepared for any outcome. Let Laura know I'm planning to leave town after meeting with the lawyer, I said. It's best I stay out of sight for a while. Is this something the police might need to get involved in? Brian asked, raising an eyebrow. No, I replied. Our older sister is now the CEO of the family company. Tomorrow, she'll appoint Eric Stevens as president. Michael will be demoted to vice president. This is happening why? Brian asked, puzzled. Mom doesn't want Michael to destroy the company that Dad and I built before she finds a buyer, I explained. I agree with your approach, Brian said. You should be packed up and ready to leave right after your lawyer's appointment. Michael is volatile and doesn't think things through. He could react unpredictably. After Brian left, I cleaned up the kitchen and headed to Ace Hardware to pick up a new lock set for all the doors. It took about 2 hours to install. I was in the process of changing the security system codes when my phone rang. It was Emily's father. What's going on, Daniel? He asked, his voice filled with concern. My granddaughters have been calling from an unknown number because Emily confiscated their phones, and yours is never on. Did you ask Emily why? I countered. She says it's personal and will explain later. Megan and I want answers now, he replied, his frustration evident. Emily moved out on Friday, I said. She called me home while the movers were finishing up and served me with divorce papers. She told me she's in love with another man and that his name doesn't matter. Are you serious? He asked quietly. Absolutely. The movers gave me her new address because Emily wouldn't. She's moved in with my older brother. Depending on who you ask, they've been involved for 2 to 5 years. She's demanding that I have no contact with Alex and Taylor and is only allowing 1 hour a month supervised visits. Why would she do that? You've been a great father, he said. Emily probably doubts I'm their biological father. My lawyer will request DNA tests to confirm. I've also removed myself from the family business, I explained. It sounds like she knows who their real father is, he suggested. What should I tell my granddaughters? He asked, concern heavy in his voice. Tell them the truth. They haven't been getting it from their mother, I said, my voice breaking slightly. After we said our goodbyes, I reset all the security codes and went to Golden Corral for a bite to eat. I had just left the lawyer's office at 11 a.m. She agreed that the situation was a mess, but thought that the video Brian sent would undermine the plaintiff's credibility. She believed that their blunders had put me in a strong position. I had canceled all of Emily's debit and credit cards and removed her from all bank accounts. My next stop was the real estate office to drop off the new house key and access code. Then, I hit the road south, with no particular destination in mind. About an hour later, Laura called. Just checking you're on the road, she said. Gina just walked in to meet Eric Stevens. I left about an hour ago after dropping off the keys, I said, continuing southward. We'll keep you updated, Laura said. Text me first so I can pull over, I requested. I stopped at a rest area and finally allowed myself to let my emotions surface. After a while, a police cruiser pulled in. The officer got out and approached me. I saw you pull in a couple of hours ago and got worried, he said, concern evident in his tone. I've been dealing with a lot emotionally and decided to take a break from driving, I explained. Going through a divorce? He asked with a knowing smile. Yes, how did you guess? The road south with no clear destination is a common escape route for people in your situation, he said, handing me a cold soda from his cooler. We chatted for a bit until a text message came in. Need privacy? He asked. No, you might find this interesting, I said, putting the call on speaker. How did it go, Laura? I asked, eager for an update. Eric accepted the president position temporarily, knowing it was your suggestion, Laura reported. He and Gina informed Michael of his demotion. Michael didn't take it well and refused the vice president role. Eric told him, I guess you've decided to quit. I'll call security to escort you out. Michael cursed and blamed you for everything. So Michael is now out of work, like me? I said. That must be a blow to his ego. Off the record, Daniel, I think that was part of Gina and Mom's plan from the start, Laura said. Expect a call from Gina soon. The police officer saw me smile as I began to explain. My wife of 17 years left me for my brother last Friday. I resigned from my position at the family business and demanded they buy out my shares. They didn't anticipate this. I had just finished explaining when Gina called, so I put her on speaker. When can you get back here? Gina asked. Why? It sounds like you have everything under control, I said. Eric is perfect for the job. My husband has lined up financing, so you can buy Michael's shares. Mom wants him out, and he'll use a business loan for it. Eric agreed to be vice president if you return as president. Fine. I'll meet you at Mom's around 6 tonight, I said. Tell Laura to order new office furniture and repaint the offices. If she gets it right, I'll give her a 10% raise. We said our goodbyes, and I managed a strained smile despite the whirlwind of recent events. What's the name of your company? The officer asked, his curiosity piqued. Wright Electrical. We cover about a third of the state and are always expanding, I replied. Your slogan is no job is too big or too small, he said, recognizing the motto. That's right. It was my dad's favorite saying, I confirmed. We chatted for a few more minutes. He gave me his business card and directions to reverse my rot, which I appreciated. His kindness was a small comfort in the midst of everything. He followed me out, ensuring I was okay before he left. Back in town, I noted his card's details and then headed to my parents' house around 5:30 p.m. My mother greeted me warmly, and we shared a quiet moment. Gina was at the airport picking up her husband, so it was just Mom and me. We were catching up when my phone rang. It was Emily's father. Hi, Dad. What's up? I answered. Have you heard rumors about your brother around the workyards? He asked, his tone anxious. Let me step outside, I said. Yes, I've heard something, but I haven't seen proof. Why? He has illegal videos on his computer. Alex and Taylor found them and are scared to be near him. We picked them up from school. What should we do? Call Joe, I advised. Explain and say you're giving the kids sanctuary. Use a disposable phone. Why call Laura? He asked. Her husband's a cop. He can handle it, I said. Thanks for helping my daughters. Text me your number, he said before ending the call. I spoke with my daughters until my mother informed me that the police wanted to speak with me. I texted my number to my mother-in-law's phone and cleared my messages. Brian, good to see you. What's going on? I asked as Brian entered. Your daughters are missing, and Emily filed a kidnapping complaint against you, Brian said. I looked at my concerned mother. When did they disappear? After school at 2:30, Brian replied. I handed him the state trooper's card. Call him. You'll understand. Brian made the call and smiled with relief when it ended. You have a solid alibi. You were with another officer when the kids disappeared. Brian received several texts and stepped outside. When he returned, he asked to speak privately. We went into another room. What do you know about the rumors about your brother? Brian asked. People say he likes them younger than he should, I said. I always kept my girlfriends away from him because I had suspicions. Your daughters found disturbing content on his computer. They're in sanctuary while we investigate, Brian said. I sat down, my head in my hands. When I reconnected with Emily, she was with a wild crowd. I picked up my drunk brother that night, and Emily asked for a ride home. I wonder if Michael was her date. I wish you could prove that, Brian said softly. Tell the daughter's protectors we won't charge them. I need a few days to resolve this. Your mistake was giving them my wife's number. It's Emily's parents. I had no clue, I said, but I told them to use a disposable phone. Brian laughed lightly. Be thankful for carrying in-laws. I'll get a warrant for your brother's computer and may need your daughters to testify. We returned to the living room, and I escorted the officers to the door. Just as I opened it, Emily walked in, her face anxious. Are you arresting Daniel for kidnapping? She demanded. No, Brian said. He has an alibi. He was with a police officer when your kids went missing. Emily's face went pale. Maybe the girls ran away because they don't want to live with you, she said, trying to cover her fear. Brian, should I go home in case they show up? Emily asked. Smart idea, Brian said with a hint of a grin. They can decide where they want to live. Call me if they show up, Brian said as he left. After the officers left, I turned to Emily. Was my brother your date the night I gave you a ride home? Her expression said it all. I guess I know how long you've been with him. My mother, furious, shouted, Daniel, throw her out now. If I see her again, I'll use one of my husband's rifles. Run, Emily, I said with a wry smile. She might actually shoot you. Emily fled in fear. I couldn't help but laugh. Well played, Mom, I said. I meant it, she replied sternly. I called Emily's father. Can you bring Mom and the kids to my mother's for dinner? Are you serious? He asked, surprised. We're celebrating my daughter's return. No more problems with Emily or the police, I said. We're on our way, he said. Mom, the girls need to stay here until I can get furniture. Is that okay? I asked. Why don't you all move here until the divorce is final? Mom suggested. I'll take them shopping for new clothes tomorrow. Sounds good to me, I agreed. Make sure they get new cell phones. Emily took theirs to prevent contact with me. Mom informed the kitchen staff about the extra guests. I brought in my suitcases and suits, and Mom showed me my room. Emily's departure exposed her and Michael's true relationship. She had been involved with Michael before reconnecting with me, and now, as everything came to light, the family dynamics were shifting in ways neither she nor Michael had anticipated. One Wednesday afternoon, while Daniel was away on a business trip, Michael arrived at Emily's house. They embraced passionately, and Michael declared his claim over her loudly. They had intense, primal lovemaking multiple times that day. Michael confessed his deep feelings for Emily, saying he felt complete only with her. That night, they continued their passionate affair until they fell asleep. On Thursday, after sending the girls to school, Emily and Michael spent the entire day together. By Friday, Michael reaffirmed his dominance in their relationship, and Emily submitted to him willingly. She even performed oral sex before Daniel returned home. Emily, having had her tubes tied, believed she might have been pregnant otherwise. When nearly caught by her eldest daughter, Michael suggested they move in together. They hoped Daniel would eventually accept their relationship, but he did not. Instead, Daniel resigned from his job and questioned the paternity of his daughters. That afternoon, Michael returned to tell Emily he had been ousted from the company by their new CEO, his sister. They realized their actions had unintentionally ruined Daniel's life, facing the fallout and societal judgment, with even Emily's parents ignoring her calls. She needed to reconnect with Daniel and find a way to communicate. She called him to ask about their daughters. Daniel, have you heard anything about the kids? She inquired. No, but you shouldn't worry, he replied. Why? Emily asked. Because if they're as fortunate as you, they'll be picked up by a man like Michael, who will train them just like he did with you, Daniel said. Emily ended the call, overwhelmed with shame and self-recrimination. Daniel's harsh words made her realize how different he and Michael were. Daniel wanted her to be better, while Michael had taken advantage of her. She felt used and embarrassed, understanding now how her morals and principles had been compromised. At my mother's place, we celebrated with my daughters and Emily's parents, relieved after a tumultuous few days. The girls enjoyed seeing Aunt Gina and Uncle Jack. We discussed our plans until the divorce was finalized, which made the girls happy. Emily's father and I took a private walk. "Daniel, how long has Emily been involved with your brother?" he asked. "Since I first brought her home from a party Michael was at," I said. Emily had confirmed Michael was her date that night. His eyes filled with tears. "Why did Emily start pursuing you then?" "I think Emily and Michael weren't serious at first," I explained. "She saw something different in me. Our early marriage was good until Michael's desire grew, and he started pursuing her aggressively. He always felt he was living in your shadow." "I didn't know that," he said, saddened by how Michael dragged Emily down. "The police will seize Michael's computer this week. If they find what we suspect, Emily will get supervised visitation. She deserves that. Some people have to learn the hard way," he added. Tuesday morning, I arrived late at the office, enjoying reconnecting with my daughters. My mother was thrilled with the girls' day out. At the office, employees applauded as Eric Stevens, Sarah, and Helen welcomed me. I informed Eric about the office renovations. The newspaper announced my appointment as president, with Eric promoted to vice president. The news of Michael's departure led to an influx of new business opportunities, making me question how much he had cost us. While picking up the rest of my clothes from my former home, Michael attacked me from behind. In the ensuing struggle, I used a tire iron to defend myself, injuring his leg. A neighbor called the police, who arrested Michael for aggravated assault and drinking. I woke up in the hospital with cracked ribs, internal bleeding, and extensive bruising. My mother said I looked like a character from Soylent Green. Michael faced charges for aggravated assault. My daughters were deeply affected by the ordeal. "What happened to me was a result of how your mother and uncle acted impulsively," I told my daughters. "People driven by emotion lose perspective, making situations worse. I'll recover, but the consequences for them might be severe." The girls and my mother stayed with me until I fell asleep. The next morning, Gina, Mom, and Jack visited to discuss Jack's loan proposal. Jack suggested expanding north by taking over a competitor's contracts and making a low offer on their equipment and buildings. "Why not just by controlling interest in their shares?" I asked. Jack explained the competitor's high debt and costly union contracts made that impractical. Mom then surprised us by saying, "Daniel has been effectively running the company for years. I want to give him 27% of the shares to ensure control, since we can't count on Michael agreeing to sell the rest. The rest goes to Gina. Thanks to Daniel's investment skills, I have enough to live comfortably. Does anyone owe?" Mom asked. "I do," I replied. "I'll agree if Jack becomes our CFO. He may need to take a pay cut, but that's the sacrifice." Gina, teary-eyed, was moved by the offer, especially since Dad never accepted Jack. "I'll cover your moving costs and house purchase if you agree," Mom added. Jack, astonished, shook my hand and said, "I'd be honored." Mom was excited about Gina moving home. After they left, I called Eric to discuss our plans. Eric mentioned political support for our asset and contract pursuit and emphasized the need to act quickly if the court accepted our offer. Released from the hospital on Friday, Mom drove me to pack at my house. Gina would arrive the next morning for house hunting. My lawyer had secured restraining orders against Emily and Michael. Emily's parents had visited 3 times. "It's been quiet," Mom said. "The girls have had time to adjust." "How are they emotionally?" I asked. "They're coping better than I expected, but they need some private time with you," Mom said. "They have the whole weekend with me if needed," I replied. "I'll also stop by the motor vehicle office for Breeze Learner's permit materials." Jack had given notice and completed the company's valuation. Gina would bring the report. Despite a lucrative counteroffer from his firm, Jack chose the sign-on bonus of a new house. "Jack has the expertise we need for growth," I said. "Tailoring him into the family business is overdue." "Why wasn't it done before?" Mom asked. "The president wouldn't approve it," I explained. At my house, I thanked Mom and went inside. I found a letter from Emily, which I discarded. I called a cleaning service to remove food, clean the place, and shut off the utilities. I packed my clothes and personal items, then left. I shaved, keeping a mustache and goatee for a fresh look. Brian called to inform me Michael's place had been raided and his computer seized. Michael's lawyer was negotiating a plea deal. My daughters, already back from school at Mom's, helped me move and unpack. We ended the day chatting on the bed. When you have lovemaking just to satisfy needs, it's different from making love to strengthen a bond, I explained. What brought Uncle Michael and Mom together was more about physical attraction and desire than love. Their relationship was built on deceit. Taylor then surprised me by relating it to her red dress. What Mom and Uncle Michael did was like me taunting you with this dress. I'm sorry for that. I handed Bree the learner's permit booklet, and she squealed with delight. Thank you, Daddy. My daughters were growing up and had learned a valuable lesson. I was proud of them. Mom asked what they wanted for supper, and they chose mac and cheese. We enjoyed a delightful meal of pork chops and baked beans. Exhausted, I went to bed early. Around midnight, Alex crawled into bed with me. As I cuddled her, I thought how Emily might have twisted this innocent moment. I had a bankruptcy court proposal needing my signature to double our company's size. Eric and I reviewed and signed it on Monday. Laura sent it to the state capitol by courier. I also informed Laura of her new annual salary of $70,000, effective immediately. Later that day, Laura approached my office and quietly closed the door behind her, signaling the start of a private conversation. Brian wants you to know what's going on, she said in a low voice. I immediately perked up, sensing the weight of the news she was about to deliver. You have my full attention, I replied, leaning forward. The images found on Michael's computer are of local girls, Laura began, carefully choosing her words. Brian believes it's essentially a trophy list of girls Michael took advantage of over the years. One of them is Emily. This information could be key to your divorce, especially in questioning Michael's motives for moving Emily into your home, implying he might have been looking for access to your daughters. I felt a wave of disgust, though not entirely surprised. Michael's always been reckless, showing off pictures of women he's been with. He was 23 when he started seeing Emily, who was only 17. That's statutory assault, and this pattern could paint a very different picture in my divorce case, I replied, the wheels in my head already turning. We need to figure out how to use this effectively. Laura nodded. Brian is working on a detailed internal report. It's up to the district attorney to determine how to proceed with charges. Brian will personally bring you a copy of the report once it's ready. Tell Brian I owe him one, I said, appreciating how deeply involved he had become in unraveling Michael's destructive behavior. Laura smiled softly, sensing my gratitude. He was overwhelmed by your generosity, and it's not just him. Sarah has also been promoted to junior management as recognition of her hard work. And now that Gina's husband, Jack, is joining us as CFO, we need to expand the team and bring on a qualified assistant within our staff. We're planning to use Michael's old office furniture to set her up. I raised an eyebrow at this. What's the reason for that? I asked, curious. Well, with the rapid growth we're planning, especially if the acquisition goes through, there will be days when management is stretched thin or entirely out of the office. Sarah and I, as executive assistants, need to be ready to make decisions in your absence. We'll need to trust this new assistant fully, just as you trust us, Laura explained. I appreciated her foresight. If any issues come up with the new assistant or even with Sarah, it'll be your responsibility to handle them. But you know you can always come to me for advice. Laura's face brightened with pride as she left the office, clearly eager to take on the challenges ahead. When I packed up to leave for the day, I noticed that she and Sarah were already deep in discussion, planning for the next phase of the company's growth. As I walked out, Eric caught up with me, eager to talk about the new structure we were implementing. I've been reviewing the restructuring plans, and it's brilliant, Eric said enthusiastically. We're preparing for the new job openings if our offer is accepted. Human Resources is already compiling lists for relocations and promotions. Good thing I made sure to include that 30-day notice before we officially take over. It gives us time to prepare, I said, feeling reassured that the team was working on all fronts. Gina's husband, Jack, has already agreed to join as CFO, and without his financing plans, none of this would have been possible. We'll also be reaching out to Michael this week to discuss buying out his shares in the company. Any developments on the divorce front? Eric asked. We have a court hearing this week to conduct the DNA tests, I replied, mentally preparing myself for what was sure to be an intense session. When Friday rolled around, we were the last case called before Judge Donald McDonald. I had heard a lot about him, particularly about his strict reputation, but in person, he didn't seem as imposing. Standing about 5 feet 10 inches and weighing around 180 pounds, he appeared to be in his late 50s, a man with quiet authority. My lawyer laid out the details of my case, explaining how Emily and I had reconnected, only for me to discover her ongoing affair with Michael. She presented an affidavit from my mother, which confirmed that Emily had confessed to the affair having lasted for over 2 years. As a final blow, she played a video recording provided by Brian, and I could see the judge's interest peak as he watched it. I then took the stand, recounting the day Emily accused me of kidnapping my own daughters. The judge's expression grew more serious as he listened to my testimony. Emily's lawyer tried valiantly to counter our claims, but the evidence was stacked against her, and their arguments faltered. After hearing everything, the judge finally spoke. There's substantial evidence to suggest an ongoing affair between Emily Lewis and Michael Lewis, which raises the possibility that one brother may have tried to pass off his parentage onto the other. A DNA test will be required to determine the true parentage of the children, he ruled firmly. Furthermore, Michael Lewis's disclosures to the police and his subsequent actions are critical in this case. The divorce is hereby granted to Daniel Lewis on the grounds of infidelity. Emily was utterly devastated, her face drained of all color, while Michael's expression twisted into a mask of barely contained rage. The judge's implication that they had manipulated me for years hung heavily in the air, and it seemed to break something inside Emily. As we made our way out of the courtroom, I noticed Emily's parents and her older brother preparing to leave as well. They looked pained, their expressions stiff with disapproval. When Emily approached them, they turned their backs on her, a clear sign that she had been shunned due to their deeply held religious beliefs. I approached Emily alongside my lawyer, deciding to twist the knife just a little. Emily, you must be proud of yourself. You've managed to destroy 2 families in less than a month. For what it's worth, Alex and Taylor are doing well, I said as we walked past her. Emily's tears spilled over, her sobs following us as we exited the courtroom. Outside, her family stood waiting for me. I approached her parents. Mom, Dad, do you want to take the girls for the weekend? I asked, offering them the chance to spend time with their granddaughters. Emily's mother hugged me tightly. We'd love to, she said softly, clearly grateful for the opportunity. As I turned to leave, Emily's brother, Greg, extended his hand toward me. Good to see you again, old friend, he said warmly. If my daughters don't completely wear you out tomorrow, I added with a smile, maybe we could grab a late supper and a few beers. Greg chuckled, nodding in agreement. I'm actually moving back for good, he said. 20 years away is long enough. I'm here to house hunt and find a job. As we were talking, my phone rang. It was Laura. The 30-day countdown has officially begun, she said, her excitement palpable through the phone. Thanks for the update. Let Eric know that I may have found our new head of the resource department if I can convince him to take the job, I said, turning back to Greg. So, how would you feel about starting at $60,000 a year? After 6 months, you could head up Wright's new resource department. Sound interesting? What exactly would that involve? Greg asked, intrigued. Managing the purchasing, distribution, and inventory for 3 main hubs. These hubs will be responsible for delivering supplies to both retail stores and commercial sites, I explained. Greg's eyes lit up with interest. Of course, I'll take it, he said without hesitation. Emily's father, who had been listening quietly, chimed in. Daniel, why don't you show Greg your house? If he likes it, I'll cover his down payment. Later that day, Greg and his wife decided to make a full-price offer on my house, pending Emily's signature. Greg seemed amazed by how smoothly everything was falling into place, the ease with which he and his family could start over in their new life. Feeling a sense of closure on both professional and personal fronts, I made a quick stop at the wine shop and picked up 2 bottles of wine, along with some cheese and crackers. It was time to relax, reflect, and prepare for whatever came next. This expanded version adds more detail to each conversation and interaction, giving the events more weight and showing the emotional. Before heading back to the office, the upper management team had a small celebration at a nearby bar, raising their glasses to the company's success. It was a brief but lively moment of camaraderie before we all called it a night. While driving home, my phone buzzed with a call from my daughters. "Dad," Alex said excitedly, "can we go with Grandma and Grandpa for the weekend?" Pretending to be surprised, I smiled. "Go ahead and have fun," I said, masking the relief I felt at the thought of a quiet weekend. When I got back to my mother's house, she was already waiting up, as she always did when I had big news to share. Over a cup of tea, I told her about the day. "Greg's getting a great deal on the house," I said, leaning back in my chair. "The items I'm throwing in are worth more than what he's paying, but it'll set his family up nicely, no matter what Emily did. Greg's always been diligent, and they deserve a fresh start." Mom nodded, her soft eyes filled with pride. "You always take the high road, Daniel. Your father would be proud of how you've handled all of this, just as I am." Her words sank in deeply, especially in the midst of everything. "Thanks, Mom. It means a lot, but I can't pretend it doesn't still hurt. I loved her once, still do, in a way." She gave me a knowing smile, the kind only mothers can give. "You'll heal. In time." I shifted in my chair and brought up the business. "Oh, by the way, Michael sold his shares to me for $5 million through my lawyer," I said, barely hiding the irony. "Guess I'm staying on the board." Her brow furrowed. "What motivated him?" I shrugged. "He said he was never happy in the industry, stayed because it was family-owned. Now he and Emily are moving to Florida to develop some property he owns there." The corner of my mouth lifted. "He has no idea the business is worth over $40 million. According to Jack's report, we've already secured $15 million in assets from the takeover. We only spent $10 million to buy those contracts up north, pennies on the dollar. Jack's thinking we'll recoup about $7 million once we streamline operations." Mom's eyes widened in amazement, and I continued. "We're rebranding the fleet and using local contractors. We'll give them a 10% Christmas bonus, tax-free. That kind of incentive always improves customer satisfaction." Before I could finish, she smiled mischievously. "That's wonderful, but don't think you're off the hook. I'm dragging you to the community fundraiser tonight." Later, at the event, I found myself listening to the story of a family trying to raise money for their daughter's cancer treatment. It tugged at something deep inside me, and without a second thought, I called our accountant, arranging for a $50,000 donation to cover their bills. That's when I first met Dr. Laura Evans, their doctor. I wasn't looking for anyone at the time, but something about her caught my eye. After I presented the donation receipt to the family, Laura approached, her voice soft but full of admiration. "I'm so impressed. You've just changed their world." She leaned in, grinning. "I'm taking you home for dinner." I laughed, surprised by her boldness. "Well, you'll have to drive me back because I came with my mother." She laughed with genuine warmth. "You can't be serious. That's my mother, Emma, over there," she said, pointing across the room. I raised an eyebrow. "Emma, right? She's one of our greatest contributors. I didn't realize the company was named after her." Laura smiled, eyes twinkling. "Well, now you know. So, tell me, what was wrong with the woman who divorced you?" I sighed, glancing down for a moment. "She got involved with a man who has no morals. It's sad. They're both going down together." Just as we were getting comfortable, Greg's wife, Nicole, approached us. "Laura, I can start early if you need me. I'm staying here with the kids. I'm not going back with Greg just yet." She turned to me. "Daniel, what are you doing here?" "I was just talking to Laura," I said, chuckling as I gestured toward my mother watching us from across the room. "She's keeping an eye on me." Laura raised an eyebrow and smiled. "How do you two know each other?" "He's divorcing my sister-in-law," Nicole said, laughing softly, "and soon he'll be Greg's new boss. He gave us a great deal on his old house." "Why?" Laura asked, clearly intrigued. I shrugged. No matter what Greg's sister did, Greg is family. After that, Laura and I couldn't resist talking more. She took my hand and led me to the grocery store, where we picked out steaks, salad, and dessert for dinner that night. The connection between us felt instant, electric. The evening passed in a blur of easy conversation and shared stories about our lives. I hadn't felt that comfortable with someone in years. By the time I got home, it was past midnight, but I had the best night's sleep since Emily left. The next day was Sunday, and true to her word, my mother dragged me to church. After the service, I heard from Gina that she had found a house and put in an offer. I told her to submit the agreement to accounting so we could cut the check. That afternoon, Alex and Taylor met their mother for lunch at the mall. Later, when they returned, they told me it hadn't gone well. They'd mentioned to Emily what they had found on Michael's computer, and it was the first time she had heard about it. Emily had been devastated, realizing that she had lost any hope of gaining sole custody of our daughters. Even the girls noticed that their mother seemed deeply depressed. Meanwhile, things were getting worse for Michael. The district attorney had laid multiple charges of statutory assault against him, and the parents of his previous victims were pressing charges. He was arrested the next day, right in front of Emily. The realization hit her hard. Michael was never going to be part of her future, and she would never regain custody of our children. 2 months after meeting Laura, Michael was out on bail, and Emily and I finalized our divorce. She received $4 million, but no shares of the business. The DNA test confirmed what I already knew. Alex and Taylor were my biological daughters, and I was granted sole custody, with Emily getting visitation rights as long as Michael wasn't around. The reality of how far Michael had fallen became too much for Emily, and during mediation, I could see her heartbreak when I suggested that Michael's intention was to get closer to my daughters. It shattered her, though I still provided the name of 2 investment advisors to help her manage the settlement. As for the business, things were progressing smoothly. We caught up on contracts delayed by bankruptcy and were ahead of schedule. The financials were so strong that we decided to rebate 10% after final payments, and Greg's sharp negotiations saved us an additional 20% in purchasing costs. A few months later, I prepared for a barbecue at my mother's house, excited to introduce Laura to the family. When I picked her up early that morning, she looked stunning in a white dress embroidered with monarch butterflies. My daughters were waiting when we arrived, teasing me about being nervous. "If your dad's girlfriend, he picked a good one," Alex said with a grin. Later, Greg and I had a moment alone. "Looks like you're falling in love," he said, a knowing smile on his face. I didn't deny it. By the time the sun had set and the party wound down, Laura and I were inseparable. A few days later, I surprised the family by announcing our engagement at dinner. The room exploded with joy, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was truly moving forward. But not everyone was moving on. Emily, overwhelmed by the failures of her choices, took her life shortly after our engagement. Michael followed her not long after, unable to escape the wreckage he had created. Despite the tragedies, life moved forward. A week before Labor Day, Eric, Jack, Sarah, Laura, and Olivia surprised me with champagne and cake. "What's the celebration for?" I asked, laughing. Jack grinned. "We paid off the loan in full. We're debt-free." I exhaled, feeling a massive weight lift off my shoulders. Thank God. I never want another 6 months like the last. Jack chuckled. "It wasn't all bad. And I can't wait to be your best man in 8 days." Everyone laughed, but Laura caught my eye, giving me a secret smile. It was more than just the wedding we were excited about. Our future was just beginning, and it was filled with possibilities.